Hi everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel, Stewart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial, we're going to paint this gorgeous coastal landscape painting. I'm going to teach you how to blend a sky and how to paint realistic easy clouds. I'm going to teach you how to blend ocean water with deep water and shallow water as it comes into the beach. We're going to teach you how to paint waves and create shadows and highlights to create realism. And lastly, we're going to teach you how to paint a cliff top with some nice flowers just to give the piece a nice realistic feel so you can paint this gorgeous beach coastal landscape painting. So let's get into it. So a nice easy tutorial today. We're going to need the following colours. They are titanium white, cad yellow, matte orange, rose pink, sap green, phthalo turquoise, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, iris purple, burnt umber and matte black. Now I've got an A4 canvas that I've painted burnt sienna. I've got the horizon halfway down the canvas and a far off cliff that we're going to use colours to push back into the distance. We're going to have an ocean coming into a beach, and then in the foreground we're going to have a nice cliff with some rocks and some flowers, so it looks like we're standing at the top of the cliff looking down onto this beautiful ocean. So like always, we're going to start with the sky. We're going to start right at the back of the painting and we're going to work our way forward. So we're going to make a nice sky colour, and to make a nice easy sky colour, what we do is we mix cerulean blue and cobalt blue together. So cerulean blue is more turquoise and cobalt blue is more cooler, and we're going to add plenty of white, and as you can see we get a nice realistic sky colour. And then to create the lighter horizon, so a good rule of thumb when painting skies is the horizon, which is where the bottom of the sky, just here, where it joins onto the ocean, is always a shade lighter than the top of the sky. So all you have to do is get cerulean blue and cobalt blue and just add loads and loads and loads of white, so plenty of white. And if you just paint the base of your horizon a lighter shade of blue, and then as you move up into the sky, once we've blocked all this in, all we're going to do is just add a little less white and a bit more blue. So just like usual, we're just going to block in the painting. We're just going to be nice and scruffy. Don't worry if you have any of the underpainting shining through, we'll go over the top. We just want to work on the colours and work out where everything is. So as you move up into the sky, all we're doing, look, we're adding cerulean blue and cobalt blue and just a little bit less white, and we should get a darker shade of blue. So there we go. And all we're going to do is just mix it into the horizon. And to mix, all you do is just create little X shapes, and you should blend the two tones together very, very easily. So I'm just going to make it a little bit bluer at the top. So again, cerulean blue, cobalt blue and just less white. So at the very top of the painting I've got hardly any white, and at the base of the horizon I've got loads of white. And all we're doing, we're just going to make an in-between colour. So I'm just going to add a little bit of white, so it's not too dark and it's not too light, it's right in the middle. I'm going to load up my brush, so let's get it right in the middle so it's not too dark, it's not too light. Load up my brush and I'm just going to create X shapes and just blend the two tones together. Easy peasy, look. And it should give the effect that the sky is just fading off into the distance, and by using the nice dark colours in the corner, what it does, it just frames your painting and just frames the scene. So easy peasy, nothing too hard, just really simple. So we've got this nice light colour at the horizon and we've got this darker colour at the top of the painting. Now, like always, if you're like me and you get streaks and you've got bits of the burnt sienna shining through, you can always dry your work with a hairdryer and then just go over the top and make your painting look more vibrant and brighter. Acrylics, because they're water based, unfortunately they pick up some of the colour from underneath, and I always use burnt sienna simply for the fact I can notice where I've missed and rework areas just to make it look more pretty. You don't have to use burnt sienna, I just find it easier than using a white canvas because it shows me where I've missed. But all we want to do, we just want to go over the top just to make all those horrible brush marks go away and just make all the transitions look incredibly smooth and just look more professional. So easy trick, just by drying your work and just giving it a second layer of the exact same colours. So lighter at the bottom by adding more white, and gradually adding more blues as you go up into the sky. You should get a lovely blended sky. And as I say, look, you just create X shapes. Really, really easy. Just blend, look, just create little X shapes and it will blend the two colours together. So cerulean blue is more turquoise and cobalt blue is more cool. But by combining the two, you get this lovely royal blue, it's called. And then look, you just add a little bit of white, not too much for the top of the sky. And we'll get a nice in-between colour. And if it's too dark, look too cool, you just add a little bit more cerulean blue, a bit more of the turquoise blue. So if it's a bit too cool, look, you just counter that with some of the cerulean blue, and it will just make it more realistic and more sky-like. So look, if you can see, there's a big jump between the middle section and the light section. So all I'm going to do, look, watch, I'm just going to create X shapes, and that's how you blend. So I'm just going back and forth. I'm really gently with my brush. I'm hardly putting any pressure. Look, like rocking back and forth. And while the paint is wet, it just blends together, and the transition just looks seamless. So look, just going back and forth, just so it blends. And then in the corners, we're just going to add a little bit more of the blues, just so it's nice and dark. There we go. A bit more cerulean just to make it look pretty. And then we're just going to frame the painting by making our corners nice and dark. And we're doing the exact same trick. Look, we're just doing our X shapes and just blending into the previous colour. Just so there's not a big line and a big jump in colour. It all blends and all the transitions look pretty. There we go, absolutely perfect. So easy. Once you know how, you can do this with any sky. Now if you dry your work, please, we're going to paint some clouds over the top. So we want to have that far off cliff nice and far back, but I want to have some wispy clouds just so people can focus on. So we're just going to get plenty of white and we're just going to mix it into that mix. And we're just going to make an off-white. So we want to create sort of the horizon colour. So it was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and just more white than anything. So it's not pure white, it's not titanium white, it's still got hints of the blue in it. And all we're going to do, we're just going to load up a smaller brush and we're just going to gently push down and try to create wispy clouds. Now the reason I'm not using pure white is because I want to push these clouds really far off into the distance. So by having a tint of blue in the paint, what will happen is the acrylic paints will pick up some of the dry underpainting, that lovely transition in our sky, and it will just make it an off-white, and it won't look too harsh and bring it forward, and it will look like little clouds fading off into the distance. Now what I like to do is I load up my brush. I have plenty of paint on my brush. I've got no water on my brush. It's totally dry. And I just push down into the canvas and just create little splats. And then I just gently, because the brush is very soft, but it's dry, I just gently push into the canvas and it blends into the background sky. And because the canvas is nice and dry, if you make a mistake and you don't like your clouds, you can just get a wet towel, a wet piece of kitchen roll or a baby wipe and just wipe it off. So look, all I do is load up my brush and then I push down and just let the brush almost sort of scrape against the canvas and just create little shapes. And the more you push down harder, the bigger the blob you'll get. And if you ease up on the pressure, you'll get sort of wispy bits, almost like chalky residue, and you can create sort of wispy, fluffy clouds. So it's really easy to do. Look, so if you push down hard, you'll get a big blob, but if you just ease off on the pressure, you just get this sort of chalky little clouds, and that's perfect for like making them look like they're fading off into the horizon. We don't want to do too much, we just want to do enough. Look how realistic that looks. Just to push it back. We want it nice and far back into the distance. So imagine we're standing on top of a cliff and we're looking down and looking out to sea. That's what we want to create. So we're going to get our cobalt blue, and we're going to add a little bit of brown to it, a little bit of burnt umber. And we're going to add a little bit of sap green. So cobalt blue, a little bit of burnt umber and some sap green, and a little bit of white. And what we're going to do now, we're going to create a far off cliff that's in the background. So we're going to add a little bit more cobalt blue. Now the reason we use cobalt blue is to push something far back into the distance. If you use things like black, it will bring it forward and bring it towards you. But by using blues, we can push things off into the distance and make it look like it's far, far, far away. And remember, acrylics always dry a little bit darker. So as we're putting the paint on here, it looks quite light, but I'm assure you it will dry a little bit darker. So what we're doing, we're trying to push this cliff far off into the distance. So if you imagine you've got blue sky, so a lot of these cliffs and mountains would have a blue tint to them because the sky is shining down on top of them. So by using cobalt blues, it's not as harsh and we can just push it back. And the great thing is you can always darken it up or you can always lighten it. It's just for a base. It's a bit like our sky. We just want to block everything in, and then as we go along we can sort of gauge if we need to make it more detailed or more darker. But right at the beginning of the painting we just want to block everything in and push that off into the far distance. So we're going to paint and block in the ocean now. Now if you imagine on the left hand side here, that part of the ocean is going to be extremely deep, and as we move to the right and it joins up with the sand, we're going to have a lot more shallow water and we're going to have things like waves. So first we're going to make the deep ocean water. So we're going to mix a colour called phthalo turquoise. Now if you haven't got phthalo turquoise, I appreciate that. You could use cerulean blue, a little bit of cobalt blue and some yellow, and you should get a turquoise. So cerulean blue, cobalt blue and some cad yellow, and you should get a turquoise. And so we're going to get phthalo turquoise, and all we're going to do is just add a little bit of cerulean blue and a little bit of cobalt blue to the colour. So we're just trying to make a sort of bluey turquoise. So that's all we're trying to do, and we're going to make a nice dark colour for our deep ocean. So again, don't worry if your horizon's not straight. We're going to use tape and we'll neaten everything up in a minute. We'll measure everything so we have a nice straight horizon. All we want to do is just block everything in. So all we're trying to do, we're trying to use darker blues to give the impression of a deep, deep ocean in the far distance. And then as we come towards the right and the water gets more shallow and it comes up onto the beach, the colours will get lighter because the water is more shallow and it will blend in with the sand. So all I'm doing, look, just blocking it in. As I say, just like the sky, don't worry if it's mucky, don't worry if you've got any brush marks. We just want to get everything sort of blocked in just so we know where everything is, and then we can work on the detail. Now to make it more shallow, all we're going to do is add more cerulean blue, and just like the sky, we're going to add more white. So all we're doing is just by adding more white, we can make it more shallow. So look, all we're doing, we're just getting more shallow, and we're just doing the same trick as we did with the sky. We're just blending it while it's wet into the darker blue, just so our transitions are nice and soft. So we'll come up diagonally to about here, I think. So this type of water is where it's not too deep and it's not too shallow. So just gently blend it. See, just like the sky, the more you work on your blending to create the underpainting, the more, once you've had the highlights like the clouds, and we're going to add the waves onto this ocean water, the more it tricks your eye and it gives you less work. So it's really, really easy. So as I say, hopefully all these tutorials are teaching you just all these really simple tricks like blending that you can use on skies and oceans. So there we go, look, it's all blended in, so the transitions look nice and soft. So again, as we come in, we can dry our painting. So please dry your work before you apply any painting tape. You can measure a nice straight horizon. And then if you just apply some painting tape rather than sellotape, because painting tape isn't too sticky. You can buy it in any art shop, or you can buy it on Amazon or anything like that. And then when you remove it, it shouldn't pull up your previous painting if your work is nice and dry. So please dry your work with a hairdryer before you apply painting tape. And all we're going to do, we're just going to mix some of that horizon colour. And as you can see, there's a little bit of burnt sienna shining through, so I can see where I've missed. That's the handy thing of using a darker colour. And I can just make that horizon nice and straight by going straight down to the tape. And just make sure that my horizon is perfect and straight. And the same with my mountains. So I can just mix some of the previous colour, and I can just come down here and just make sure that all my shore and all my mountains are all nice and straight. It's a really annoying thing to not measure your work and just try to guess it and estimate it, and you don't get a nice straight horizon. So look, once we've removed the tape, we can just do the same with the ocean. So please dry what you've just painted. So please dry the horizon and your mountains. We can line up a nice measured straight line. I always use chalk, just because then it doesn't leave any horrible dark marks like a pencil, like a charcoal pencil. So I just use white chalk, because the great thing about white chalk, it doesn't leave any marks or residue. So let's make sure we've got this nice straight horizon now. And all we're going to do is we're going to go right up to the tape and do the same with the ocean water. So as you can see, because we've got the burnt sienna, it's really easy to see where we've missed. So we're just going to mix the dark ocean colour first, which was phthalo turquoise, cerulean blue and cobalt blue. So let's get plenty of that on our brush. And we're going to go right up to the tape, look, and we will get a perfect straight horizon. So we've got this nice deep ocean, and then we'll work on our blending. Now there's the subscribe button. Please, if you haven't liked or subscribed already, please do so. And don't forget to turn on the bell notification here on YouTube, and you'll be alerted when I upload a new tutorial each week. I always say to people each week, if there's anything you want to learn, like clouds, waves, or there's certain scenes like a desert, or I don't know, a forest, anything like that, put your ideas in the comments below, and hopefully I can make them into a practical painting tutorial for you to help. So what we're going to do, look, we're going to add more white as we come towards the beach, as the water gets more shallow, and we're just going to blend the two colours. I think a bit too much white in there. So I'm just going to add a little bit cerulean blue. So look, the great thing about acrylics, if you do make your paint too dark or too light, you can always just paint over it. It's not like oils or anything where you're going to get horrible muddy colours and you have to wait for ages, a few days for anything to dry. You can just go over it So look, we're going right up to the tape, so we get that nice straight horizon. And then look at the big jump in colours. It looks horrible. And you wouldn't see a sea like that. So what we want to do, look, we want to create our X shapes. Just push down really gently and just blend the two colours together. So take your time. Work on your blending. A lot of the realistic paintings you see, the blending you wouldn't even notice. It's almost seamless. So that's what we want to kind of do. So that's looking pretty cool. So now we're going to get even more shallow as we come towards the beach. How do we do that? We add more white. So we're going to add a little bit more white. And we're going to add a little bit of burnt umber. We don't want to add yellow because yellow will turn our water green. So if we add a little bit of burnt umber, what it looks like is it looks like the water and the sand are sort of starting to mix. And you get this sort of musty light blue. So we're trying to create really shallow water. So imagine this water is sort of coming up to your ankles, up to your knees. But we don't want to add yellow because just like in the sky when we paint our sunsets, you don't want to add blue and yellow together because you get green. So by just adding a tiny bit of the burnt umber, it just makes it nice and earthy. Still got plenty of white in it to make it look shallow. It's just a little paint recipe, a little cheat, just to create more shallow water. And again, look, while it's wet, we just want to gently blend. So we're just going to come into the beach here. And what we'll do is we'll create some waves and some froth in a minute. So we're just going to do our X shapes again. Same trick. Over and over, so easy. Just making those transitions really nice and soft. So just take your time, relax, and blend. Now again, just like the sky, sometimes with acrylics, no matter how much you paint it, it comes up with a little rough area where you have a bit of the canvas shining through. I find the only way to sort of fix that is to literally get a hairdryer and just dry it so the canvas is totally dry, and then just add a big dollop of thick paint over the top. So right here, I've got a big bit of burnt sienna shining through, and no matter how much when we were doing the blending and the paint was wet, no matter how much I put on, it just wouldn't seem to stick to the canvas. Sometimes that happens with acrylic paint. So if you ever do get that, just get your hairdryer out, give it a blitz, and then get a big blob of the colour that we mixed and just go over the top. So we're going to get even more shallower now. So what we're going to do is we're going to add plenty of white now. So we've got hardly any blues, and we're going to add plenty of burnt umber. So we're going to create this really really nice sort of beigey colour. So we've got burnt umber, a tiny bit of cobalt blue, a little bit of cerulean blue, but predominantly white and burnt umber. And we're just going to make the very shallow water now. So this is the water that's coming up to the beach. And just mixing with all the sand. So you kind of get that wet sand look. So as you can see, a lot of this is super easy. It's just creating the paint recipes, and once you know them, you can use this for all your own artwork. So you can take note and you can write them down, and then you know how to create deep water, deep ocean water, and you know how to create shallow water. So it's really, really easy. And then what we're going to do now, we're going to get cad yellow and a little bit of this colour, which is burnt sienna. Now I left it off the mix because I appreciate not everyone has burnt sienna. What you can do is just add a little bit of brown and orange. Brown and orange. So burnt sienna is just burnt umber and a little bit of orange put together. So yellow, tiny bit of orange, a little bit of burnt umber and some white. And you can add a tiny bit of purple just to make it look a little bit cooler. And we should have this lovely mix for sand. And all we're going to do is we're just going to create sort of lines coming across, to create the look of dry sand. So the reason we're doing it quite bright yellow is to imply that the sand is dry, and we've used that sort of dark bluey brown to create the sort of wet sand where it's mixing in with the ocean. And don't worry if you've got a bit of the cobalt blue or a bit of the burnt sienna shining through, it actually looks quite nice. It gives it a bit of terrain. So we've got this nice seamless transition in our water, and we've got this nice bit of beach. So we're going to get some titanium white, and we're going to get a fine liner. So we're just going to get pure titanium white and a fine liner. So a fine liner is just a thin tipped bristled brush, because it's much easier to use a really thin brush just to get detail. So imagine you were holding a really thin pencil or pen. And all we're going to do, look, we're just going to create some wonky sort of diagonal lines, and we're going to start making the impression of waves coming into our coastal beach. So I'm just sort of going diagonally across, and we're just using pure titanium white. And the reason I'm making it quite wonky is just to imply waves. So I'm just trying to work out how they would come in my head. So I'm just going to start creating some wonky waves. So load up your brush, plenty of white, and then use the thinness of the nib of the brush just to create these sort of frothy ends of waves. And then as the water gets more shallow, they sort of bunch up and come a bit more rounded as they come up onto the beach, don't they? So we're just going to make it a bit more like hilly. They sort of go up and down and up and down, less flat. And then again, as it comes more shallow, just come more of a loop. So we're just trying to create the edges where it's all frothy, so it's more of a higher loop now. But can you see how the underpainting with the transition from the dark to the shallow, now we're adding this white over the top. It's tricking the eye. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get some cobalt blue and some phthalo turquoise. So if you haven't got phthalo turquoise, you can just add a bit of green and yellow and just a little bit of white. So just trying to create a sort of medium, not too dark, not too light, with a little bit of green and blue together. And we're just going to get a flat-headed brush. Now, flat-headed brush got a really sharp edge. It's perfect for drawing straight lines. And all we're going to do, we're just going to do quite a chunky line across our ocean. And this is just going to be the shadow for a wave. So this is going to be a far out wave that's quite powerful, that's coming from the deep ocean towards the beach. So there we go. So we're just trying to create the impression of waves using this darker colour. And then what you can do is, with hardly any paint and the nib of that flat headed brush, you can just go under the whites that you've just painted in, just to create a sort of a shadow. So I've got hardly any paint on the brush, and I'm just creating a shadow underneath. And if we remove our tape now, we should have a lovely perfectly straight horizon, a lovely perfectly straight faraway mountain, and a nice transitional ocean. So now we've got our lovely dark wave. We're going to get some white, and we're just going to create some caps of waves. So all I'm doing is just trying to create a little shape for wave. As I say, I want to make this tutorial more for beginners and intermediate artists. I don't want to go too detailed. It's a nice easy tutorial. So all we're doing, look, we're just trying to give the impression of a big powerful wave coming into the shore. So we're just trying to create the caps of that with some titanium white. And then what we can do is, now this is dry, to make it look more vibrant, we can give it all a second coat of white. So we're just going over the edges. Look, we can just make it more vibrant, stand out more. And then you can do this trick that I'm going to show you in a minute. That if you want to create sort of seafoam, if you sort of wipe away most of the paint onto your a cloth or a bit of kitchen towel, I always use my scruffy painting clothes, and then just sort of scrape your paintbrush sideways. It's got hardly any paint on it because the brush is dry and you've wiped away most of the paint. You've just got the sort of chalky residue of the white paint. You can sort of just glaze areas and create sort of seafoam. So all I do is I get some titanium white, I wipe it on my clothes, but you can use some kitchen roll. So I've got barely any paint, I've just got a sort of little residue of paint, and the brush is nice and soft and dry. And look, you just scrape it into the canvas and just create little zigzag shapes, and it will just leave, just like when we did the chalky marks on the clouds, it will make a little chalky impression. And that's how you can create wispy sort of seafoam. So again, it's just to create all the sort of shallow water. And if you want to put a sharp edge on your waves, you just load up your brush and just go around the edges, and that will give it the nice sort of foamy edge that you get with waves. So it's a super easy technique. So look, if you want to make your edges a little bit darker, just so they're more prominent, and then you just look, as the paint runs out, just scrape it in. So look, we want to make our edges nice and thick, because with waves they get that sort of bubbly carpet look, don't they? So look, you can do it all the way here. Look, just scraping in, just creating little zigzags. This just kind of creates all the froth and foam. Such an easy technique. So a lot of painting, as I say, is just having patience. So just by doing each stage and knowing your colours and knowing brush techniques, and then just doing each stage to the best of your ability, it just all comes together at the end. So just going over the edges to make them look more bold, just with pure white. So look, if you want to make your edges look much more bright and vibrant, just go over them when they're dry. And now we've got that sort of sea foam as we add the sort of frothy edge. That looks wicked, that looks really, really cool. So let's do the same for this one. Just try to make all the edges look nice and rounded. I think with water everything's really rounded, you don't really get any squares or sharp edges. So if you can just make everything sort of rounded, it gives it that realism. So let's do the same here. So this is all starting to come together really pretty and nicely. You can even just create some splats coming downwards. So what I'm doing, I'm just pushing down, creating little splats. And these could be sort of really powerful waves coming into the coast. Now we're going to take some cerulean blue and some cobalt blue and some white. And all we're going to do, we're just going to create some shallow water coming into the beach. So again, this is sort of the shimmer on the wet sand. So when the water retracts back, it sort of leaves that sort of glistening, sort of wet, shallow sand. So by just using some of the sky colour, so we're sort of using the horizon colour. So cerulean blue, cobalt blue and white. We can just sort of leave these sort of impressions of some shimmering sand. So again, look, we're just scraping it across the canvas. And then we're just going to add more cobalt blue and brown to the mix. And a little bit of the phthalo turquoise. A little bit more cobalt blue and brown, why not? Just make it a lot darker. And I'm just going to put some bobbles here on the sand. So these could be little rocks. Maybe some terrain, why not? Could have some rocks in the far background. And now we've got this darker colour, what we can use is at the base of this mountain, we can start adding some detail. So we can start building the mountain up and making it look more 3D. So what we're going to do, we're going to create some shadow at the base just to give it some terrain. So all I'm doing, I'm just like we did with our ocean water, I'm just creating little zigzags, little shapes coming up from the bottom. And this is just to imply rocks and boulders and terrain on our mountains. So these could be some far off rocks and bits. So I'm just going right to the bottom, right where the ocean joins the mountain. And I'm just creating sort of the impression of detail, but still leaving plenty of gaps in the underpainting to shine through, because we don't want to cover the whole mountain and make it really dark, because it will bring it forward. And I'm just going to get some of the horizon colour, and I'm just going to glaze over the top. Now this whole area is dry, I'm just going to get some of the horizon colour, and I'm just going to make this a tad shade lighter. I think just here on this corner you'd have some of the sunlight sort of shimmering down. And I don't think that ocean would be as harsh. So as I say, with acrylics, they dry so quick. So if you don't like an area of your painting, you want to lighten it up, or you want to darken it, you can just mix the same colour and just go over the top and just do what I'm doing. Like, you can just sort of glaze over the top, almost like you're colouring it in. You can make it less harsh, just so the transitions again look a bit smoother. And if your canvas is nice and dry and your brush is dry, you can just smooth it in. So it's almost like glazing over the top with a crayon. you just sort of shade in areas, just really nice and softly, just blending. I just think that deep ocean was just a bit too harsh. And I'm just going to get some tape, just neaten this area up. We'll add some detail. So now we've got this lovely transition in our water. We've got our sky all complete. We're just going to add some detail to this far off cliff. So by adding things like blues, browns, and a little bit of sap green, a tiny bit of white, you can just create sort of a not too dark highlight, but sort of a bluey grey. And again, we can just fill in this area. Just going to make it a shade darker, just so it stands out a little bit more. So I just want the mountain itself just to look a bit more greyer, just a little bit harsher, just so it stands out, brings it a little bit forward. And it's going to add a lot of white to the mix. And blue. So a lot of white and cobalt blue. And I'm just going to again just make the impression of terrain. So I'm just putting some highlights on it. So now we've got the mixture between the darks and the lights. It's just to give the impression of far off mountains. So there we go, that's cool. And we can just remove our tape. Now it's nice and straight. And if we go back to our darker mix, which was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and a little bit of burnt umber. Again, look, we can just add some more shadows and notches and boulders. So we're just trying to build it up. These are all the areas that are sort of in the shade where you get rocks and boulders. You get all these notches on the cliff. So we always put our shadows on first, and then we'll put our highlights over the top. So we've got all the dark shadows now. So we're using these dark colours to create the dark areas. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to add a load of white to that mix. And we're going to create a highlight. So these are all the areas where the sun is going to get a little bit of light on it. So we're going to add a tiny bit of yellow to the mix. So we've got plenty of white to that blue and brown. And a tiny bit of yellow. And we're just going to add, with our fine liner, little areas that the sun is sort of clipping areas of the cliff top. And just reflecting a nice highlight. So again, by having blue in there and having the blue underpainting, these highlights, even though they look quite sharp and bright now, they'll dry nice and flat and they will absorb some of that blue. But look, all we're doing, we're just leaving little gaps, just creating the impression of detail just by using colour. So again, just make sure you've got plenty of the underpainting to shine through. There we go, easy peasy. And then we're just going to add a tiny bit of sap green to the mix. A tiny bit of cobalt blue just to push it back. So again, we're just using cobalt blues to push the green back. We don't want pure green. And just on the very top, we're just going to add a little bit of grass. So normally on the top of cliffs, you get a little bit of patch of grass. So again, if you have too much green, it'll be too bright. So if you use plenty of cobalt blue, you can just make it more saturated, more in the distance, and just push it back. So an easy trick, just always add cobalt blue to anything if you want in the far distance, and you can push it back. So there we go, our cliffs are looking really pretty. Looking all texturized and rocky now. So it's such an easy technique, as I say. And we could have some rocks here, why not? Just painting the scene out of my imagination. And then now this is dry, we could even use that dark shadow colour, that blue and brown, just to give some of these waves a little bit of an undershadow. So just as they're coming into the ocean, look, we can just get some blue and brown, even a tad of purple if you want. And with a fine liner you can just go under some of them, just to give them the 3D effect, just so it has a look of a little bit of shadow. Not too much, because again, dark colours bring things towards the viewer. You want to still have them quite far back. But it's just a little technique. If you've got a really sharp fine liner, you can just create the illusion of shadow, just to give it more 3D effect. You can even put it, look, see, under the banks of this wave. So when you're happy with your waves, like as I was saying before, look, sometimes acrylics dry really dark, so I still think this area here could do with a little bit of sunlight. So when you have nice sort of bright clouds and a bright horizon, they reflect onto the water. So all I've done, I've mixed a little bit of the horizon colour, and I was using my flat brush just to sort of create a reflection onto the water, so when the clouds come over they get a bit of the colour from the clouds above, and it sort of gives a nice sort of shimmer on the ocean water. But for some reason it was looking a bit blocky and a bit weird, so again, rather than use a flat brush, because a flat brush has a very sharp edge, so it's perfect for using for things like waves, it's not too good for blending. So just swapping over to a round headed brush. So this paintbrush just has a round head, and all I'm doing, I've got no paint, I'm just blending the paint that I've just put down with the flat headed brush. Because of the round head, it's much easier to blend. So look, all I'm doing, I'm going right up to the horizon, and I've got barely any paint on my brush. I've got a completely dry brush, and I'm just sort of glazing the sort of shimmer onto the ocean below. So now we're happy with our ocean water. What we're going to do, we're going to get pure black now. So you can either use matte black or Mars black or ivory black, whatever black you've got at home. And what we're going to do, we're going to use black over this cobalt blue to bring this cliff top really close to the viewer. So blacks are really good for bringing things forward into the foreground. So the darker the colour, the harsher the shadow, and the nearer it is to the viewer. So we're going to use black to outline the bottom of our painting and create a cliff top. So this is what we're standing on, looking out into the ocean. And what it should do is make our far off cliff look far off into the distance, because that's more bluer. So we're just using black. It's an easy trick to bring things into the foreground. And we're going to swap over to a fan brush, and we're going to load up our spiky fan brush, and we're going to mix cobalt blue and sap green together to create a nice dark green. So cobalt blue and sap green. Going to load up all the bristles of a flat fan brush, and then what we're going to do, we're just going to create long grass. So a fan brush is perfect because of its name. It looks like a fan. It's brilliant for creating texture on things like grass. So all we're doing, we're leaving some of the black underpainting to shine through, and we're just creating, using the bristles, the illusion of long grass. So again, just like we did with the mountain, we put the dark shadow colours on first, and then we're going to put the highlights over the top and the detail. So first we're putting the dark grass. So look, if I zoom in for you, look, we use the bristles just to imply terrain again. So if you push down and turn the brush sideways, you can create short grass, and if you turn it upwards, so the brush is vertical, you can create long grass. So it's really handy. You can buy these for $1 or £1 in a shop. It's called a fan brush. and they're brilliant for doing things like long grass or painting fur on an animal. They're really, really great for. And we want to make it a little bit spiky, so we're going right up to the black and just creating some of the edges, some of the spikes hanging over the top, just to give the impression of grass. So again, a lot of painting is knowing your tools, knowing what brushes to use for what parts of your painting. So I would totally recommend a fan brush for long grass. So easy peasy, we're just blocking in this area before we put any of the detail on. So there we go, so we've got a nice grassy bank. And then we're going to create a highlight colour to put over the top. So we're going to mix sap green. So we're going to get plenty of sap green and plenty of cad yellow. We're going to mix the two together to create a light yellowy green. Got to load up our fan brush and then just do the same trick. And a tiny bit of purple, just a tiny bit. And all we're going to do, look, we're just going to create long grass. So if you turn the brush upright and just scrape down the sharp edge matched with the bristles, will create the illusion of long grass. So again, just like the ocean, once you know the brushes, once you know how to do the transitions, put the darks on first, then put the highlights over the top, you can create the illusion of detail. So we want to keep our corners nice and dark because we want to frame the painting. So I'm not going to put any highlights in the corners. I want the highlights more in the middle because just like we're standing off on the cliff top looking out into the ocean, we want the middle to be the focus point for the viewer. So by putting our highlights in the middle, it gives people something to look at and to focus on. So we're just going to have some of this bright yellow in the middle. So these are all the area of the cliff that's in the sun. And that's shining on our grass, why not? I haven't decided what we're going to do with rocks and stuff. We'll put that in a minute. And then we're going to create some flowers. So I'm going to get some bright pink. So I've got rose pink here. I'm going to mix a little bit of purple. So what we're going to do again, we're going to add a little bit of cobalt blue. We're going to create a dark sort of creamy purple here. And we're going to put the shadow colour on first. So we're going to create some wild clifftop flowers. So all I'm doing, I'm just creating a daisy shape. Anyone who watched the daisy tutorial the other day, you're just creating almost like a star shape. So look, all I'm doing is just creating a little star. And we're using this cool colour to imply some of these wildflowers are in the shade, and just like our grass, some are in the sunlight. So look, just create a little star shape. You can even leave a little gap in the middle if you want, just a little circle in the middle just for the pollen. And again, like anything, you don't want them all in the same place. You don't want them all the same height. Try to have some big, some small, some look at the bottom of the painting, just sort of half finished. So you want them all in different places. Try to be as random as you can, just to create the realism. You don't have them all in a straight line, all the same size. So really easy, just create little stars. So let's have a few more here at the bottom. One in the middle here. Just a little one. Just a baby. Have a little one here in the corner, just poking out. Some on the edge. There we go. I want to leave that corner nice and dark because that's where I want to sign it. And then we're just going to get some of the rose pink, so bright pink, and we're going to create a highlight colour. So if the sunlight is coming from the left hand side and it's shining on this cliff top, the left hand side of all these flowers would be getting the sunlight, hence the highlight. So by using the dark colour first and then putting the highlight on the left hand side, again it just creates some of the flowers in the shade and some of them getting the sunlight. So again, super easy trick, just makes the work look more realistic. So easy to do, it's just using colours to trick the eye. So these bright flowers are right in the middle. And let's get some of the horizon colour, which was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and lots of white. We can add some little middles, some pollen. We can add some little daisies, why not? We'll just add some little flower heads. So again, I don't want to use pure white because I don't want to make it super vibrant. I just want to have some sort of daisies. It's spring here in London and all the flowers are blooming. It's a lovely time of year. So we want to create things that are really pretty. This could be somewhere like Cornwall or Dover or something like that. So just going to create some little flower heads. Now I think it looks a bit boring at the corners. I want it more framed. So what I'm going to do, just while it's wet, I don't really care. I think I'm just going to block in some rocks just to frame the painting. So I'm just going to have some rocks either side just to sort of frame the corners. So don't worry if it's scruffy. You can wait, if you're following along at home, you can sort of wait and see what I do and see if you want to do this as well. But sometimes with a painting, it just looks a bit flat. Because I'm painting this from my imagination, I haven't really got a reference photo or anything. Sometimes when you paint things from your imagination, you haven't got a reference photo. It can look a bit weird because it's not realistic enough. So I think if I add a little bit of black and just while it's drying, I can frame it by putting some rocks in the corner, and I can mix some of that yellow and green, just put some highlights here in the middle. So I'm just testing out what I want to do. So that's the thing with painting, there's no right answer. What's good for one person, another person might not like. So I'm just going to mix some brown and blue together, just create a shadow colour. So brown and blue, tiny bit of black and some white. And I was going to do like a similar trick that we did to the cliff tops and just sort of add some highlights to the stones here to make it look like pebbles and rocks on a cliff. But I think because I rushed it, as I say, I'm just trying to work this out in my head, I think it looks too scruffy. I don't think this this sort of highlight colour works. It's almost too grey, isn't it? There's not much difference between the flowers and the rocks. So don't follow this part at home, but I wanted to leave this in because I want to show you with all painting, it's up to you and you're the boss at home, so it's what you prefer. And everyone makes mistakes and everyone has to jiggle around things. That's part of being a good artist and learning how to do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get a dry brush and I'm going to get some cobalt blue and I'm just going to create some shadow. So if we're going to have a big rock, that's going to cast a big shadow here. So I'm going to just put some of these flowers in the shade. And I'm going to do the same over this side. So all I'm doing, I'm just glazing some cobalt blue with my flat brush over the top. As I say, don't worry if those rocks are smudged. I'm going to neaten all this up in a minute. So while it's starting to dry, I'm just going to get some black and I'm just going to put in some rocks either side. So I'm just going to make them a lot more darker. So I'm just going to create like a cliff bank. So just going to get some black. I'm just going to go over this rubbish sort of highlights that we did. So that's the thing, not everyone nails things first time. Not everyone is super cool and is absolutely perfect at anything they do. They normally learn through mistakes. It's the best way to learn because you see what works and what not to do. So I'm just using some black just to create some, and a fine liner just to create some gaps between the flowers. Again, just to create some texture. A little bit of rocks at the bottom. And I'm going to mix this colour. Now this colour is brown and cobalt blue. And lots of white. So brown, cobalt blue, lots and lots of white. And if you just add more brown till you get it more of a tan colour. So just keep adding brown till you get more of a tan colour. You can even add a dot of yellow just to warm it up, or a dot of orange if it's still a little bit too grey. And I think this colour is a bit warmer. This would be better for highlights. Yeah. So I'm just going to do the same trick. I'm going to leave lots of the underpainting, lots of the dark black to shine through. And we're just going to create what looks like texture in the rocks. So again, just using colour to trick the eye. Create stone. So all we're trying to do, just like we did with the faraway cliff tops, just leave plenty of gaps in the underpainting and just create the illusion of stone and little knocks and crevices. We still want to leave our corners very nice and dark to frame the painting. But it just makes it more interested. We could have some here at the bottom. And again, all I'm doing, I'm just using a fine liner. And where the painting always dries darker, I'm just using yellow and green. So cad yellow and sap green just to brighten up the middle. So where we've just glazed that area in the cobalt blue. I'm just going to reapply my pink to those middle flowers. So as I was saying to you, you can rework areas, you can change areas, and then once you've changed it, you can just go back and neaten everything up. So don't be afraid if you ever make a mistake in the painting. Just dry it with a hairdryer and just rework it. There's nothing you can't fix. And then we're going to put in our daisies again. So we're just going to put in our highlights. And this time I'm going to use pure titanium white here in the middle. So it's got no blue. So these ones in the sunlight, I'm going to use titanium white. Just make them really vibrant. So again, you have somewhere to focus on. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of cerulean cobalt blue, but still plenty of white either side to the left and the right, just to make them look a little bit more in the shade. So there we go, just create some little tips of flowers, and even some of the long grass, just get a bit of sunlight. And then if you just get some black, look, you can just outline your rocks just to make them more sharp. Same with the stems of the flowers and the grass. And I'm just going to get some cobalt blue. I'm just going to wipe off most of the paint, and I'm just going to glaze here the right hand side, so this part of the cliff looks more in the shade. Oh, it's all coming together. See, I always tell you, the painting always comes together right at the end. So all these little steps, when you're following along, always come together right at the end. And then what we're going to do, we're going to get some of the horizon colour, and we're just going to put some wash onto the beach. So plenty of white, tiny bit of cerulean blue, and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. And we're using our flat brush just to create some wash here on the beach. So again, just these finishing touches to make it look realistic. Now we know where everything's going to be. And look, if you make a mistake, because your painting is dry, you won't lose any detail, you won't lose any work if you just use a baby wipe to neaten it up. So now we're just going to know everywhere what everything's going to be. We're just going to put the last finishing touches here in the foreground just to make it look super pretty. So again, I'm just using some sap green just to make it a little bit darker to the right here. So this bit's more in the shade, but still not all black. Still got some green. It's the same here to the left. And I'm just going to get some Naples yellow. Now Naples yellow is just cad yellow and white, and you can add a dot of black like a pinprick. It's just a posh way of saying lots of white and a bit of yellow. So Naples yellow. And all I'm going to do is just outline some of the rocks just to give them a really sharp edge, just so it looks like the sun is beaming down on them. And it just gives it a nice definition between the rocks and those flowers. So by just outlining them, just looks like some of the sunlight is bouncing off them. And I think now, because we've got the rocks either side, it just frames the painting. And again, because we've just glazed that area with a bit more blue, I'm just using some of the horizon colour to put back some of the highlights. So as I say, if you are a bit of a perfectionist like me and you rework areas, you can just go back and forth. If you change things up, don't be afraid to put things back. See what works, see what doesn't work. And then once this is dry, I'm just going to use some titanium white just to really emphasize these waves. So as I say, all these little finishing touches are what makes the painting come alive. So let's create some waves, there we go. So by just going over your waves, and especially these borders, look, the outer border here, with that really thick, get a big thick dollop of titanium white, and we can just do the smear zigzags. We can really emphasize the seafoam now. So all I'm doing, I'm just loading up my brush with titanium white, and look, I'm just creating a really nice thick sort of carpet outline just to create the waves and the wash. And I'm just creating little zigzags coming out from that thick border. And because it's a second layer of paint, it just makes the whites much more vibrant. So as I say, with acrylics, sometimes just going over them once or twice can really make a difference, really make your painting pop. So look, just create the thick border, just create an outline, and then just create zigzags coming from that outline to create all the sea froth. Super easy technique, easy peasy, nice and vibrant, and it makes it look super realistic. It's so easy, perfect for beginners. And now this area is all nice and dry. Again, doing the same thing, just by emphasising going over the whites with just the same colour, just to make them look sharper and brighter. You can do the same with the yellows and the green grass if you want to, and even your pinks. So as I say, just reworking areas goes a long way, and it only takes an extra 5 minutes. You've already painted it anyway, so going over the top isn't exactly hard. So look, just going over with the Naples yellow, just to make it look brighter and prettier. It's not hard at all, look, it's so easy. And it just does really make it stand out. It's a weird thing with acrylics. Sometimes just adding a second layer just makes your work look really, really bright. So there we go, we've got this lovely cliff top now. Got our sun beaming on our pebbles and rocks. Oh, I want to go on holiday. Excellent. And then all I'm going to do is take some of that nice tan colour we mixed earlier, which was cobalt blue, burnt umber and white, and I'm just going to gently blend it into the Naples yellow again, just so the transitions aren't as harsh. It just looks a bit more seamless. And use some white and pink just on these ones here in the foreground, just to make them look bright and vibrant. And she's finished. So I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So you've learned how to do a gradient in your sky and how to paint realistic clouds and use darkened corners. You've learned how to use cobalt blues and how to do texture on a faraway cliff and using those cobalt blues to push it back. You've learned how to do deep ocean water with a shimmer on the top. You've learned how to do seafoam and a beach and a coastal wave. You've learned how to do darkened corners to frame your painting and how to use shade and highlights to brighten up areas and create this lovely coastal beach acrylic landscape painting. So my name is Murray. We have plenty of landscape painting tutorials on the channel. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thank you to everyone who has, and happy painting, and I'll see you next week for another tutorial. See you soon guys, bye.